was the first one. Being curious about what others people's interests are. So yes, that helps us to really take an interest in what they're saying. Um, so yes, that was the first one. Anyone remember the second one? Or
Believing the best about them who approach you in conversation.
yes, believing the best. So having like a more positive kind of it was called positive regard. The psychological term was so when people come to talk to you or you talk to them, if they see that you are kind of exuding this positivity, they're more likely to open up to you, right? And then anybody else took notes or remember?
Kristen, give all the answers.
Anyone? The third one?
Bueller?
Bueller?
No, expressing concern about the person, follow-up questions.
Yeah, expressing concern. So in beyond just being curious and being positive, you have to express some concern and be a little bit more invested in what they're telling you too. Invested enough at least that you would ask some follow-up questions when you see them again the next time, or just kind of be interested in the outcome of perhaps whatever story they've told you. And then the last one, does anybody remember that? Oh, so sad.
Sharing more about yourself.
Sharing more about yourself, right? So it was sharing your life. So instead of just asking people questions all the time, you have to share of your own life as well. So I'm going to ask another question that will probably be silence. But did any of this stuff pop into your mind as you were talking to anyone in your life this week?
I didn't talk to anybody this week.
That's the problem with our culture today. Wonderful. Anyone else? Talk to anybody? Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So today we're gonna actually get into the 6 conversations that she's talking about. But before we get to that, she also mentions having 3 goals as you go into a conversation. So the first one is to mutually encourage. So I always, when I meet with my friends and see them, I always want to bring some encouragement to them and also to get some for myself. So I think when we interact with people, one of the best things is to leave that conversation encouraged. And it's a way, and the way we do that can be in the ways that we see something that they have, when you see something good or whatever, you call it out. So if you see something cool, say it. Tell them how much you appreciate your friend for whatever it is that they've told you about. And then it can also be an encouragement in terms of reminding them about what God's doing in their lives. So encouraging in the sense of, oh yeah, hey, I think God will be, I'm praying for you, or God will really be with you on this thing. So kind of both from yourself, an encouragement to them, but also encouraging them towards God. So that kind of mutual encouragement. So that's one goal. The second is to aid personal growth. So that one kind of, you might think, oh, that's weird. What does that mean? It's really in the sense of your friend is probably having something that they're trying to grow in, or or maybe they don't realize it, but sometimes they may. So it's like asking about goals, projects, dreams, different things like that, and then offering to help if you can. The woman who wrote this, she's a professor, so she has a lot of these kinds of conversations with her professor friends because they're all like working on something. And maybe we're not all necessarily working on something, but we may have something that we're growing in, or that we feel like God's teaching us on. And as a friend, sometimes you can see that and find, and you can provide help to people. Like, for example, I met with a friend recently, and she shared some things with me, and I thought, oh, I know the perfect book for her. So I actually got her a copy and gave that to her. So that's one way of encouraging people in their growth. And then the third goal that she mentions is to marvel, which again is kind of weird, right? What does that mean? And so she talks about how marveling is just being in awe of what God's doing. And when you are both kind of seeing something that is amazing that God is doing, you kind of have this mutual excitement about it. Because as you know, when you see something cool, you want to tell somebody about it, right? So it's that kind of thing too. So this third thing is the one that seems most unusual to me anyway. But it makes sense once I think about it. It's this way of seeing how God might be working, or even looking at just something beautiful or whatever in your life. Maybe it's art or nature or something, and sharing that together. And being able to step back from the mundane things of this world and to see a little bit bigger picture. So working that into our conversation can help to bring us all a little bit more transcendence in our life. So that was kind of an interesting aspect of that. So these are the three things that she mentions as goals in your conversations. So again, these are not things that you're probably consciously thinking about, but it kind of is a nice thing. Like before you go into a conversation, maybe you can think about this and prepare a little bit if it's a conversation that you can prepare for. So these are the goals. Anybody have any thoughts on these?
So can you repeat those, please?
It's to mutually encourage. Write this down because I might ask you next week. No. To mutually encourage, to aid personal growth, and to marvel. So mutually encourage, aid personal growth, and to marvel. All right. Oh, in fact, Edmund Burke observed that awe involves marveling at something sacred, vast, supernatural, mysterious, and so beautiful you feel overcome by the things you're thinking about or experiencing. How wonderful it would be to share that with one another, right? So, all right. So next is so now we're finally going to get into these 6 conversations that she talks about. So the 6 conversations are actually the 6 dimensions of what it means to be human. So it's social, emotional, physical, cognitive, volitional, and spiritual. So what she basically talks about is running through these different categories as you talk to someone, because you might find that you tend to like talking about one category a lot, but the person you're talking to is really not that interested in the things that you like to talk about. Rather, they may be more interested in talking about some of something else in a different category. So if you kind of think, if you notice you're not getting anywhere on one of the categories, you might switch to another one. So that's kind of the premise of this thing. So we're going to walk through each of these and kind of explain a little bit further about it, and then we'll try a little bit of this later. Okay, so be prepared. So the first one is social. So people like to talk about the people in their lives, right? A typical question you might ask someone when you see someone is like, "Oh, how are your children? How are your parents? How's your wife, husband, etc." Right? So that's pretty typical. One of the stories she mentions in here that I found really interesting is like she said that with her teenage daughter, you know, how does your parents ask you, "How was school?" "Fine." You know, like that's very typical. But she found that if she asked her daughters about their friends and what they were doing with their friends, and somehow like brought that in somehow, they just would open up and just start, you know, their faces would light up and they would just love talking about what they did with their friends. So I thought that was super interesting because, you know, I can't remember a time when anybody's asked me about my friends that way. So like, well, my parents, so, but like, yeah, so I think that was really interesting. And then a tip she gave for asking about social questions is using the word story. So like, what's the story behind how you met so-and-so or whatever? So here's some questions, sample questions that she had. So what new friends have you made recently? How do you enjoy your friends showing support to you? How are things going with your roommate, family members, pet? So do you have any upcoming plans with friends? If you could invite someone new to dinner this week, who would you want over? What do you value most in friendship right now? So these are some interesting questions you could ask people. Then she has some continuing questions too. Like if someone started talking about something, then you could say, "Oh, who else did you see there? Who else was involved?" Or if they had like a issue or something, and did you turn to any particular person for help? Have you told anyone else? What have you been learning about friendships? So it's kind of whatever it is they're talking about, and this is the case for all of these things. Whatever it is the person is talking about, you can kind of ask a question related to one of these categories, because sometimes we run out of things to ask. So this is kind of a way for moving into an aspect where they might open up more. Okay, so that's the first one, social. The second one is emotional. So that emotional is talking about feelings, right? So I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up in a family that really talks about feelings. We talked about people, we talked about events, we talked about what we're doing, what we're going to eat for dinner or whatever. But we didn't really talk about feelings. What are your experiences with talking about feelings? Did you grow up the same way as I did?
Oh, yeah.
Every Asian person in here? What about our non-Asian friends? Did you talk more about your feelings?
Oh, am I not Asian?
You're honorary Asian, all of you.
We look alike.
I don't know. Feelings, my mother, perhaps, not so much my father, but yeah, there were some feelings discussed. But yeah, there's plenty of emotions in the family. So
Yeah.
we have 4 kids, and then my mother took in my 6 nephew, niece, or I'm sorry, cousins.
Oh,
in the
wow.
house. So we went from 4 to 10. So.
Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a lot of feelings going around, I'm sure.
Plenty of feelings.
Especially in adolescence. Right?
Yes,
So, yeah, so whenever things are going on, like we can always ask, like, oh, how did that make you feel? Or what were your feelings about that? Because I think sometimes we don't always talk about that aspect of what happened. We just like to talk about the thing that happened. And you can tell there's feelings behind it, maybe, but they're not willing to say it until maybe you ask. So that's something that we could get, that would help us get into more of a habit of talking about our feelings. And I know sometimes we're afraid to do that because we're afraid that someone might get emotional, right? Like, what if they get emotional? That's okay. They can be emotional. We might not know what to do all the time, but you can always just listen, continue to listen. You can continue to ask questions. You can hand them a tissue. That's my favorite move. Just run around, find a tissue and hand it to them. But yeah, I think those are the things that we want to talk about. And I think sometimes no one ever asks us, so we never talk about it, right? So, but we actually do want to talk about those things. So I think that's an important aspect of it. And then so she had a tip also that was interesting, to use strong words strong verbs in your questions. So instead of saying, how was your weekend? You would say, did anything surprise you this weekend? So like something like that, where you turn one of your regular questions and add a different verb to it to make it more interesting. Because, when you ask, how was your weekend? People just say, oh, fine. Or they might tell you what they did, but then it's like a quick thing that moves on, right? So, so here's some more sample questions in the emotional category. Oops, where did it go? Sorry. Emotional. What things have you been truly grateful for recently? What's been stressing you out or bothering you lately? I thought that was an interesting one. What's been going well for you? What are you celebrating? Where are you feeling you need courage lately? And then some follow-up questions could be, what has this, whatever it is, been like for you? What does that feel like emotionally? Is it fear or sadness? Is it anger? Did this stir up any old emotions or give you a new emotional experience? So yeah, some of these, it really depends on the situation. But yeah, I thought it was good. So the next one is physical. And I've noticed as I've gotten older, we have more and more conversations about our physical bodies. We like to talk about like this is hurting, that is hurting. Like, did you know that this happens when you turn 40? Stuff like that. And I know sometimes it can get tiring listening to that kind of stuff. But the physical is actually a big part of us, like who we are. And again, she has a really interesting story where she had surgery, and people would ask her how it was and stuff, but she found that she really wanted to talk about like the physical aspects of the surgery, like a lot more details. So she was really glad when somebody asked to hear about that. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, there's definitely physical things that affect us. Like if we didn't get enough sleep, obviously we're grumpy for the rest of that day. So for someone to ask you, oh, did you sleep okay last night? Or something like that, and just being able to talk about it, it can lead into other things. But the physical category also includes a lot of things that we do tend to talk about a lot, which is like food and activities, your projects you're working on, your vacation. So like just physical things. So this is also an easy one. I think this is an easy one to talk about. But really thinking about how our bodies are affected too by whatever it is can be an interesting part of it. So like, and linking it with the emotional. So because sometimes, like I said, the sleep and the emotion can affect your emotions or how you're feeling. So thinking about it that way too can be helpful. Again, here's some sample questions that she has. How have you been taking care of yourself lately? What have you been doing to relax? What's the story behind this shirt or jewelry or whatever that you're wearing? Are you feeling any pain in your body? What hurts? Are you doing any home improvement projects? And then for follow-up questions, there's what did that do to your body? Did that impact your sleep at all? Did that refresh you or exhaust you? So yeah, these are interesting. All right, so we're gonna pause for a second here. So these first three is social, emotional, and physical. Okay, so pretend you're asking me, or maybe let's see. We're gonna do. We'll talk to Andrew since he's sitting here. So Andrew, how was your weekend? Did you do anything fun?
Wasn't much fun. There's chores.
Just chores.
Yeah.
Okay, now what's a follow-up social question we can ask him now?
What chores?
Is that a social question, or that would be more like a physical question? But yeah, okay. What chores?
I had to clean one of our doors in the basement.
You cleaned one of your doors?
Yeah, because I think it was growing mold. I'm not sure what it was.
Oh,
I was
wow.
cleaning it off with vinegar.
I didn't even know doors needed to be cleaned. Did you
I-
know that?
There was something at least it was getting there.
Yeah, yeah. It was.
Oh, did you do it by yourself or with someone else?
Oh, by myself.
Oh, yeah. There. That's the social question. Good job.
Did your wife help you at all?
I didn't even tell her about it. I don't know if she was aware.
I wasn't aware.
Yeah.
Okay. What's a follow emotional question?
So I was gonna ask you, what did you do to relax afterwards?
Oh, no, just relaxing. I ran to the nearby grocery, bought some eggs, and ran back. So
That was
I
your
kinda
relaxing.
tried- I kind of try to kill two birds with one stone. Sometimes I do my running in the nearby grocery.
Oh, you literally
I
ran to
do
the
that
store.
quite often.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But when you bought your grocery, how can you come back?
It's just eggs. It's just eggs. Right?
That encourages me to make more trips.
Oh.
A little-
Andrew, I have an emotional question. Did you get upset she didn't help you?
Not really, no. I mean, that's not something I would expect of you.
Oh,
Andrew, I'd really like to stick to the sweet potatoes. How did you prepare it?
I think I made a mistake there. Because when I asked who made it, I was afraid she might say it wasn't delicious at all. So I should ask her how did you find it? Who made it?
Did you enjoy cleaning the door?
No, just a chore,
It's
So
just a
I
chore,
would rather
okay.
have spent my time doing something else, but
Okay.
it needed to be done.
I know some people really like doing those home things. I'm not one of them, but some people do, right? So, yes. Anyone else have have a question for Andrew?
Yeah, how did you cook the sweet potato?
Recipe now.
If I told you, then it would kind of devalue it because it was just instant pot, That's it, nothing, just instant pot. But I had to wash it
Oh,
and cut it, but that's it.
Nice. We can ask him about that more later. All right. All right. So the next, these first three categories, we're probably fairly familiar with them and probably use them already. But the next three kind of take things a little bit deeper, and we may not think of using these sorts of questions. So the fourth one is cognitive. So by cognitive, she just means like thoughts. Like what are you thinking about? Like what are you learning? How did you think about this? It could also be like, what did you think about this movie or TV show? I like to have those kinds of conversations. So it's like about thoughts and what you're thinking about. So here's some sample questions here.
What type of vinegar do you use? Is it cognitive?
No. It'd be, what do you think of vinegar as an ingredient for sweet potatoes? All right, so here's some sample questions. What are you learning lately? How are you making sense of some news event or something happening? Have you had to make any hard decisions lately? What thought keeps going through your head you cannot get rid of, Charles? What have you been curious about lately? So like asking people like what's on their mind, basically. So because we have a lot of stuff on our minds these days. And then as follow-up questions, there could be like, why do you think that is? Or is this a new idea for you? How are you making sense of this? Blah, blah. So those are questions. So the best tip she has for this is just to say, what do you think? So that's pretty, that's a little bit, that's not too difficult to do. So the next one is volitional. So volitional meaning like the ability to make choices and act on them. So like our volition is our ability to make choices and act on them. So it's your will, right? What you're able to do. So this is where someone might need to figure out what to do. Like if they have a decision before them that they need to make. So it can be like helping someone through a problem. I know we talked last week briefly about liking to provide solutions right away, but maybe instead of us providing a solution, we can talk someone through their possible choices. So helping people to see what choices they have can be helpful. So like someone who feels stuck, then you can say, oh, well, what are some options you think you could do? And sometimes they may be able to talk themselves into something. Of course, you can give some suggestions as well as appropriate. But yeah, so I think this is an interesting one. But it's also, you can also ask like, why did you choose that? What are your choices? Like how did you end up in this place? So those are also volitional questions. So here's some sample questions again here. How have you chosen to spend your time lately? What made you decide to get together today? What's next for you today? Are you working towards any goals? So these are all like things that are kind of helping people clarify some of their thoughts and walk through something. So, and then the last core category here is spiritual. So I think as Christians, we often feel like we need to tell people what we think about God. But what if instead we asked people what they thought about God or spiritual things in general? We tend to think that people who aren't Christians just aren't interested in spiritual things, which isn't always true. A lot of people are into all kinds of interesting spiritual things. Like one of my younger coworkers previously, she'd always talk about Mercury being in retrograde, and that's why such and such is happening, and I'm like, what is this? I've never heard of this. It's like an astrology thing, right? So that could be an interesting line of conversation to ask, what is it that they do they really believe this? Is it just something they say? Or, you know what? So asking more about the spiritual side of things can lead to a place where we can start sharing about our own spiritual things. Were you gonna say something?
No.
Oh, you leaned your head way over like you wanted to. Okay. So yeah, another interesting thing. She even though she's a professor, she often likes to talk about God and Jesus with people. And so one of the questions she'll ask sometimes is, does it bother you when I talk so much about God or Jesus? and she says like she has a friend who'd be like, oh no, not at all. I love hearing about it. Like someone who's not a Christian. So like you just never know, because I think our assumption is they don't want to hear about it, but we could actually ask straight out, like, does this bother you? And if it does bother them, you know, we can tailor it a little bit better, right? So I thought that was super interesting. But yeah, this is the part, like, even amongst Christians, sometimes we don't even always talk about these things. And so I think we need to get more comfortable talking about, like, what's God been doing in your life lately? What are some things that you've seen God doing? You know, these are things that should be a natural part of our conversation. So here's some of her sample questions. Have you been thinking about spiritual or supernatural things lately? Have you started or continuing any spiritual rituals lately? Is your relationship with God something that's important to you? Are you a churchgoer? What was your religious background growing up? And then some follow-up questions could be, did you experience the presence of God in that moment? Where do you think God was? What do you think God is doing in this situation? If you were asking me to pray about this, what would you want me to pray for? I guess you could also just ask, what do you want me to pray for? Yeah, so those are kind of interesting questions there. All right, any questions about those? No, okay. So at this point, we have about 25 minutes left. I'd like you to get into groups of 2 to 3 people. And so look around you, get in groups of 2 to 3 people. You know what's coming. All right, no more than 2 to 3 people, okay? And then one of the people in your group, you pick one of the categories. So we had the 6 categories, right? I'll show them to you on the screen in a second. So that one person will be like Andrew. The other 2 will ask them questions, okay? And so instead of thinking of it like this, I gotta run through each question, which you can, but try to keep the conversation going. And if you need to switch categories to keep it going, do that, you know, and just see where the conversation actually takes you. All right. So go ahead and pick one person to be kind of like, or let the person pick the category of question. So whoever is the person being asked, you get to pick what you want them to ask you. Does that make sense? Okay. So say, if I was Andrew, I would be like, okay, ask me about emotional things. So then the other 2 would start asking, and you can use these questions or you can use some other questions, whatever you want to do. But once you start going, just start asking questions and having a conversation, a real conversation, not just this stilted thing here, okay? All right. Okay, ready? Find your 2, everybody in a group? Okay. Does anyone not have a group? Yeah, yep. Just maybe till like 25. Yeah. Come back at 12:25. Come back at 12:25. You don't have to do all of them. You want to talk? Do you have a friend?
I don't have a friend.
All right, I'll talk with you.
Talk more about sweet potatoes.
Thank you for letting me put you on the spot.
It was more like he was on the spot. Because she didn't even realize it was she. Actually, she went out. She she has another fellowship group. I don't know if it's another.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was
Okay. All right. So what do you want to do? Do you want to be the question asker or the other person?
My turn to ask her.
You're here. Okay. All right. I'm good with any of these. So whatever you want to do.
Oh. They're all hard. They're all good questions. Let's start with this. Was last week a happy week or a hard week?
Last week, I think it was a happier week because the previous week was hard. So last week was a little bit better.
Oh, okay. What you want to share? Hard week or the easy week?
Well, the hard week, I was trying to work through this one issue with an employee, and I actually made her cry. So I was feeling very, yes, exactly. I felt like, oh, I can't believe I did that. So I was kind of beating myself up a little bit. But we were able to work it out later. But that was hard to deal with. So the following week was better because that didn't happen. Yeah. So.
That happens to me too. When I lose patience.
Yeah. I lost a little bit of patience. Yeah.
Well, just go on.
Yeah.
So, in my case, I lose patience. Sometimes I feel that I made a wrong assumption. And I kind of made the person to watch this thing. So he may not have. Well, there's a reason why I do that, but it's not always like he's like that. But then because it sticks for some reason, and kind of jump. That makes me jump to conclusions. In your case, do you have that same?
I think I was trying to communicate something to this person, and she just didn't understand. And she just kept like, she was upset that she couldn't do something, but I was trying to say, you can do this if you just did this. It's not exactly the same as the way you thought, but we can find a way to do this. But she wasn't understanding it, and so I started to get a little bit like, so yeah. Yeah, I think like after she kind of slept on it the next day, she kind of understood more what I was talking about. But yeah, I didn't like the way that I had gotten frustrated about it. I wish that those emotions didn't come out like that. So yeah.
Did you actually apologize?
I thought about it, but I didn't really end up apologizing. And it wasn't like I was.
Totally wrong.
Yeah, and I didn't, and I wasn't like, I don't think I was overly harsh. Like she just had a baby. So part of me, this is where I guess I assume a little. I'm thinking like, oh, maybe she's just emotional because she's like hormonal right now. Yeah, I don't know, but she was better. So then we just kind of moved on. So I don't know. Yeah.
I had something similar recently.
Yeah.
The one who went to Hawaii.
Wait, who is it?
The guy who went to Hawaii.
Which guy who went to Hawaii?
Oh, I have a colleague who went to
Oh,
Hawaii.
your colleague. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, the one last week you mentioned. Okay, yeah.
With his wife. And
Yes.
And then he's usually very diligent about his work. And that,
Yeah.
right? But then sometimes I got impatient with him because I feel like he's he has his way of doing things. He wants to do it his way. So
Yeah.
maybe like a college.
Yeah, maybe.
He
Yeah.
wants to do it his way, which is rather than ask questions, he wants to study it very carefully.
Yeah.
Have a very deep understanding of the code and the issues around it before he actually decides to tackle it. And I was more like, why don't you ask for help?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
gotta
yeah. Right.
have a balance in it. So my approach is different.
Right, right.
And kind of, I understand him better now. Because of
Yeah.
roles like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes I feel that.
Yeah, I think in a work environment, it's so, like you have to work with it. You have to find a way to work, right? So you often have to just be able to put aside those differences. But it's super helpful when you start to understand how the other person works.
Yeah.
Then you can like accommodate, and hopefully they do a little bit for you too.
Yeah.
So that's the best kind of work relationship if you kind of know each other's strengths and weaknesses and compensate for each other. So
And
yeah.
in fact, of all the people working in the team, he might be slow, but I like how he's very thorough. And there's a you know.
Yeah, those things go together, sort
Yeah,
of, right?
so
Yeah.
it does. There's a
Right,
payback
right.
that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So I do appreciate that.
Yeah. My boss used to say, there'd be someone who'd be like kind of annoying, and she'd say, well, you know, the thing that makes them most annoying is what makes them good at their job.
That is true.
Right? Because like
That is true,
he's
yeah.
slow, but that's because he's so thorough and detailed, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Because he might be slow, but he puts in the effort.
Exactly.
to get it.
Right, right.
He's responsible.
Right.
So that.
Yeah, so sometimes our strengths and weaknesses go together.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about your happy week?
My happy week?
Yeah.
Let's see. What was, it was just happier in relation to that.
Oh, okay. I mean, to relieve that.
Yeah, to relieve that.
Resolve it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Well, also I took Friday off because I'm maxing out on my PTO, so I needed to take an extra day so I don't hit the max. But I really appreciated having that extra day because then I got to work on this and prep for worship and do all these things so that I could spend time with friends yesterday. So that was nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
And not have to do spend it on chores, right? Spend it on
Exactly.
stuff.
Yeah.
Mine was yesterday was kind of a chorish day. The previous Saturday was great.
Oh, yeah?
It was our anniversary.
Oh, what did you guys do?
We went to
Wait, first, how many years?
17.
17?
Yeah.
Okay. That's
We
wonderful.
went to Chinese restaurant in North Bethesda. Not expecting much of it because it sounds like, it's very Americanized.
Okay.
Like the atmosphere is really great. We went there because anniversary.
Yeah.
You don't want the dingy Chinese
Right,
place
right,
where
right,
the
right.
food is great. and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
cheap.
yeah.
So we went there. And surprisingly, the price of course is higher, but the food is really good. And
Oh, wasn't that place? What is it called?
Laosis.
Yes, I've been there.
Wow.
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. It
Yeah.
was good.
What did you order there? Because I feel like we ordered the wrong things.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, we ordered the
Okay, yeah.
and we ordered the something else. Oh, it's like in some Cantonese places they have the French.
Oh, yeah.
They have a take on that. It's spicy.
Okay.
So that is really good.
Really good. Okay.
We have the fried stew. But it was good. And the funny thing is, we have our typical go-to thing for someone is to go to some place to walk right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Rockville, right?
Rockville.
Yeah.
So
after that, like 3 days later, I brought my son to school. Oh, I picked him up actually, and then I went to order that thing.
Yeah.
So we ordered a plate. That we call
Yeah.
just to prepare.
Yeah.
And this is really good.
Yeah.
But I'll still try to
Okay. Huh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, that's fun.
yeah.
So when you go out on your anniversary, does David come along too? I don't know, because like my parents never went off on their own, so.
Okay. No, we don't let him come.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
We go to the pricier places. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that place is so pretty. It's so nice. Yeah.
What you did like?
I don't think we ordered the right thing. It's been a while since we ordered. I can't remember, but we got we were hoping to get the shallow bao, and they didn't have any. So yeah, but I've heard other people have good experiences there though. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some people eating also dim sum.
Yeah.
But
Those are-
that might not be their strength.
Yeah, I think you gotta find their trick. So the Peking duck is supposed to be really good. The Peking duck,
Oh, I saw a lot of people ordering.
yeah, it looks fancy. It's expensive.
Like $90 for this.
Yeah.
Like,
So I
wow.
was like, oh my gosh. So I think we were being cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fun. Okay. It's nice.
Some fun, some hard stuff.
Right. Where did you guys get married? Like where? How did? Okay.
Oh, yeah, we met in the church.
That you were both attending?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you found? Do you feel like because she speaks more Chinese, like has that ever been like
Oh, when we,
an issue, like that language?
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It becomes, yeah. Well, so when we argue, that's more English,
Okay.
and it tends to be an issue that way. And we have to speak English. But our English is really good.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
actually find yourself sometimes forgetting your Chinese. If you really hear something like, I like to hear that. Yeah, certain areas, right? So you think like stuff having to do with scientific conversation.
Oh yeah.
Politics.
Right.
Or
We're more used to using English for that, right?
what we use when we chat like this, right?
Yeah.
About how you get that thing. So she tends to forget some areas.
Yeah. Huh.
That was not. I think it's okay. For me, when I talk to her, like I just talk Chinese until I walk out loud. I didn't want to certain
Right. Yeah.
and that's that I have to switch.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, with my parents, I would use broken Chinese mixed with some English words. But to switch to English, not that they wouldn't understand it, but it felt suddenly more formal and less like family. Like so it felt weird to switch to English.
But
So
don't you feel it natural to have it that way, that it's English, that it's your
yes.
language?
Yeah, but then you never get to talk about deeper things because I can't express deeper things in those words in the Chinese, in the Chinglish. Like I'd have to switch way over to English to express any kind of deeper things, but then it felt awkward. I don't know. Those are just some of the things that I felt. But, yeah. So the language thing is very
I
interesting.
think I can understand because between my mom and my dad's English is not very good. And with my mom, I can speak to her in Minnan mixed with Tagalog and English.
Yeah.
And explore anything. My dad, some topics are, I can hold them. The first recently he used to smoke, like twice a week or something.
Yeah.
And then maybe he understands, but
If he can respond as
yeah, he
well,
understands
right?
that
Yeah.
way, right.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there were some limitations in how much I was able to share with my parents
Right.
just because of the language.
Yeah.
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 It's unfortunate, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are your parents still in the Philippines or?
No, my dad passed away a year and a half ago.
Okay.
But me and my mom continued to run for 20 years.
In where? Oh, Toronto. Okay. 20 years. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's easier to visit.
Yeah.
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 It's a quick flight. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a sister in France.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah.
Your parents are in the area.
No, they both passed away. Yeah. So my dad was one of the elders here. So he passed away about a year and a half ago. Also. Yeah. So like 2021. Yeah. So. And then my mom passed away like 10 years, almost 10 years ago. Oh, it's been 10 years. It's 10 years. Yeah.
But you have relatives here.
I have a brother who is in Fairfax.
Okay.
So he's married. He has a daughter who's 8. And then I have an aunt who's in the area still. She was my mother's younger sister. So her and my uncle, they still live where we grew up and everything. So
Are you really close to them?
kind of. I should visit more. So my cousins have both moved away, but sometimes they do come back. But I try to reach out to my aunt and do stuff with her, but sometimes I get busy and it's not enough of a priority, I confess. But yeah.
Yeah. But at least you have someone in an emergency. They too
Oh,
in an emergency.
yeah.
They rely on
Yeah.
someone in an
Right,
emergency.
yep, yeah.
Yeah.
If I had an emergency, I'd probably call my brother or Tony and Jenny, who live very close to me. Tony and Jenny, you know. Yes. Yeah, they live the closest to me. It's like Gaithersburg, Germantown, kind of the border. Yeah. Oh, people are coming back. Yeah.
Some people coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, come on back if you're ready.
Okay, nice chatting.
That was nice. All right. So, okay, everybody. How was your conversation? Did you have a good experience or bad experience?
Good experience.
Good experience. Okay. Does anyone have anything they want to share about their experience or their thoughts on the experience?
Jack might have something very emotional. He and his wife almost cried.
Oh, yeah, Montgomery County is donating wheelchairs and stuff, and I live in a 55-plus community, and we had an extra wheelchair, and I asked the community if anybody needed it before we gave it to the county, and there was a lady, we had a believers group, and her husband has Parkinson's disease, and they needed another wheelchair, and so we took it over to them, and just giving a wheelchair, we didn't think it was too big a deal, but she almost started crying. We almost started crying. Because it meant that much to her to have this for her husband. They already had a wheelchair too, but this one was, you could use had wheels on the side, the one that, so he could help her with it. Pushing the other one that they had, it just had the little wheels on the bottom, so he couldn't help her. So just something like that. You don't think, giving somebody a wheelchair would be that emotional for them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
When he told us, we almost cried too.
See, she had a great emotional conversation. Wonderful, wonderful. Anyone else want to say anything about their experience in their conversations? All right, then I guess we will end our time. Continue to have conversations with people during lunch, and then we'll continue on this topic next week. So I'm going to ask Pastor David to end us in prayer.
No, it's just a reminder to keep Dan and Sharon in our prayers. They're in the middle of their mission trip in Indonesia. I believe they'll be flying back starting Wednesday, but I think they're coming back like Friday. But let's keep them in prayer as well. Father, what a joy it is to hear all the laughter in this room as we talk about how we share your grace with the people in our lives. Father, may you infuse us with your presence in our lives in such a way that we would experience it as a privilege to be able to start conversations with people around us, with the different categories, and yet in such a way that it's natural and organic, so that we might be able to share the grace of Christ with them. Father, we also thank you for Dan and Sharon as they have committed this time in your service, as they establish your kingdom with missionary Peter in Indonesia. Father, keep them safe, free from injury, from disease, but most of all, anoint them in such a way that every act of ministry will be seen as coming from you, and that the people who experience their ministry will be able to see your hand at work there. Bring them back safely to us. Thank you for this time together. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yes.
Does this apply to these methods or these learning apply to the modern age of communication? Because we have interrupted our normal communication with the Facebook, social media platform, all that changed some of the way we communicate.
Yeah.
We no longer communicate, the butter on the kind of conversation. It's like, how's that? How's this?
Right. Yeah.
It becomes too methodical of machinery.
Yeah. Well, that's part of why she wrote this book, because she felt like, because the subtitle is Pathways to Connecting in an Age of Isolation and Incivility. So one is like the isolation due to social media, where we don't actually talk to people anymore. So she's trying to teach people how to talk to each other again. Like some of this is like, we should know this already, right? So, but and then the incivility, like a lot of these days things are so polarized. It's very easy for people to just shut people off just because they disagree with them and not want to actually hear what other people have to say. So there's so many things in our culture now that are like pushing us apart. So hopefully,
My mother used to say, how come your face is glued to the screen?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
I said, Mom, that's because everybody's communicating with this. So she was like,
Yeah. Right.
there's an age, a good age.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I think it's being able to adapt to whoever you're talking to and use whatever means possible to connect with them, basically. Yeah.
I don't like to type all that stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I know. I struggle with that too. Right.
If you're not used to it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Right. But it's like you have to make an effort to meet with them too, though. So then you're too busy to do that. So it's like sometimes it's easier just to have a short conversation here. So
I think the productivity of the world and our stage has increased so much that we don't have time for manual